welcome back. Now that we've learned to enter data into Excel, manipulate it, and format it, it's time to learn some methods for efficiently sifting through all the data we've entered to find specific things we're looking for. The first technique we'll look at is called filtering, and it's as intuitive and easy to use as it is powerful. Filtering lets us search through the rows of the data we've entered and selectively display or hide rows based on criteria that we specify. Any rows that don't meet the criteria we've set are effectively filtered out or hidden from view. This technique is handy in just about any case, but it's another one of those methods that becomes more and more useful, if not essential, as the amount of data in our spreadsheets grows. Like so many features in Excel, filtering rewards us for setting up our data in a tabular fashion. If our data doesn't have column headers and consistent types of data in each column, filtering just doesn't work very well. Fortunately, we had the good sense to set up the data in our Shave Ice tracker in a tabular fashion, so applying filters is a snap. Really, it is just about as easy as snapping your fingers. If we click anywhere inside of our data, then navigate to the Data tab of the ribbon, and finally click on this filter button that looks kind of like a funnel. Now we see all these little down arrows to the right of all of our column headers. Let's see what happens if we click the one next to our order number column. So now we get a new dialog box that pops up. The first few commands pertain to sorting, which is something we'll get to soon enough. But if we look at the lower half of the dialog box, we see a list of unique values in the order number column, with checkboxes next to each. All the checkboxes are currently checked, along with an additional checkbox at the very beginning that says Select All. If we uncheck one of the checkboxes, let's say the one pertaining to order number 2, and click OK, let's see what happens. And now we can see that our order number 2 has vanished from view. But never fear, it hasn't been deleted. If we want it back, all we have to do is click the Clear Filters button, which looks like a smaller version of the filters icon, but with a red X on it. So if we click that, our row number 2 reappears. But let's say instead of wanting to not see a particular row, we instead only wanted to see a small handful of specific rows. Now if we click the filter button on our order number column again and tried to uncheck all of the order numbers that we don't want to see, that would take a long time and just generally seems like a very inefficient way to whittle down to a small population. So how should we approach this? Well, if we uncheck the box next to Select All, we'll see that all of the other checkboxes have been unchecked as well. This means that none of the values in our data meet our filter criteria, which in this case is a good thing since we only want to select a few. So let's scroll down and select order numbers 42, maybe 44, maybe we'll go down and grab 55, and then hit OK. And now we can only see those 3 orders. So by unchecking all of the options and then scrolling through the list of unique items in the column and just cherry picking the ones that we're interested in, we were able to get down to those much faster than if we tried to individually uncheck everything we didn't want to see. Now, one really cool thing about filtered data is that we can copy and paste it elsewhere in our spreadsheet without copying any of the rows that we filtered out. So if I highlight our filtered data set here, which I can do using our Control-Shift right arrow, Control-Shift down arrow keyboard shortcut, and then hit Control-C to copy, and then hit our little plus sign down here to create a new worksheet, and then finally hit Control-V to paste, we see that we only have our 3 rows of data that we filtered for, and that none of the other rows that were filtered out have carried over. Now obviously our column-widths didn't carry over, but if we click the top left corner of the grid and just double-click the boundary between any 2 columns, we can auto-fit the column-widths, and now we've basically copied over only the rows of data from our Sales Tracker tab that we were interested in without having to manually scroll through that data and copy and paste the records over to a new tab one at a time. This technique can be extremely useful if you want to work with a filtered subset of your data without having to worry about handling a bunch of additional rows of data you're not interested in. Now, before we move on to more advanced filtering techniques, I want to clarify a couple of things. First is that the values listed in the filter dialog box represent the unique values in the column we're applying the filter to. So if I go back to our Sales Tracker tab, and then first hit Escape to undo our copy operation, clear filters, and then click the filter drop-down for a column with fewer unique values. Let's say, and let me just auto-fit columns here just so we can see our columns more clearly. Let's say the size column. Now there are only 3 options available for us to check or uncheck because there are only 3 unique values in that column. So obviously if our dataset has 100 rows in it, there are 100 values in the size column, but there are only 3 unique values that appear, so that's all we see when we click that filter dropdown. We saw so many values when we click the order number dropdown because all of these order number values are unique. They each only appear one time in the data. Another point worth noting is the process by which the filter button decides what data on our worksheet is in scope for filtering in the first place. Now, because we'd organized our data in this tabular fashion, and because our data doesn't have any gaps in it, the filter button was able to accurately guess the boundaries of our data. But there's no guarantee that it will guess those boundaries if our data has gaps, such as blank rows or columns. For this reason, I recommend manually selecting the entire range of data you want to apply filters to before hitting the filter button if you have any doubts at all about the continuity of your data. It's an extra step, but it ensures that the results you're seeing are truly accurate and comprehensive. So just to walk the walk, let me go ahead and clear filters altogether by hitting our filter button once more. Then I'll select the top left cell in our range, A1, and then scroll down to the bottom of our data, and then scroll right to the last column in our data. And then holding down the Shift key, I'll click that bottom right cell in our data, and now I'm assured that I've selected every cell in the range that I'm interested in. Then, after selecting all the data, I can click the filter button once more, and now I know that our filters apply to every row that we care about, so when I filter our data, I can do that with confidence. Okay, now that we have the basic idea of filtering out of the way, it's time to look at some advanced filtering techniques. We'll tackle those in the next video. I'll see you then.